Hello there, and welcome. I am so glad you are here. Tonight, we're going to explore every great war in the world of the Lord of the Rings. Battles fought before the first sunrise, alliances forged and shattered, and the quiet bravery of those who stood against the darkness across thousands of years. Some of these wars you may know well, others sleep in the deeper pages of history. If this helps you unwind, a like helps others find their way here too. But for now, let us begin our journey into the wars of Arda, where even the gods once took up arms against shadow. Before the world had form, before mountains rose or seas filled their basins, there was war. The Ainur, those holy spirits who sang the world into being at the command of Ilúvatar, found their music disrupted by Melkor, mightiest among them. He wove his own themes into the great song, themes of darkness and dominion, and where his voice clashed with the melody of his brethren, discord spread like cracks through ice. This was not war as mortals would come to know it, with swords and shields and the cries of the dying. This was a war of wills, of creative forces struggling against one another in the void before time began. Ilúvatar allowed this discord to continue, weaving even Melkor's rebellion into the greater tapestry. Yet the scars of that first conflict would echo through every age to come. The world that emerged from the music carried within it the seeds of beauty and the seeds of shadow, forever intertwined. When Arda was young, and the Valar descended into the world to shape it according to their visions, Melkor followed. He came not to create but to claim, not to nurture but to corrupt. The Valar built lamps of immeasurable light to illuminate the world, setting them upon great pillars in the north and south, and beneath their radiance the first living things began to stir. Melkor watched from the shadows, gathering his strength in the depths of the earth, building his first fortress in the uttermost north. When at last he struck, he toppled the great pillars and shattered the lamps, and the world was broken by their fall. Seas rushed into new channels, mountains crumbled, and the symmetry the Valar had crafted was lost forever. This was the first great destruction of Arda, and it drove the Valar westward to the blessed realm of Valinor, leaving Middle-earth to darkness and to Melkor's dominion. In the darkness that followed the fall of the lamps, Melkor, now called Morgoth, by those who suffered under his shadow, built his fortress of Utumno in the frozen north. Its halls delved deeper than any pit the Valar had imagined, layer upon layer of caverns and dungeons where foul things bred and multiplied. Here, Morgoth twisted the forms of living creatures, creating mockeries of the Valar's works. Here, he forged weapons of terror and trained his servants in cruelty. The Valar knew of Utumno's existence but did not yet move against it, for they feared the destruction such a war might bring to the fragile world. Instead, they tended their gardens in Valinor, growing the two trees whose light was silver and gold, while Middle-earth lay shrouded in starlight and shadow. Morgoth's power grew unchecked for ages beyond counting. The awakening of the elves at last moved the Valar to action. These firstborn children of Ilúvatar opened their eyes beneath the stars at Cuiviénen, the Water of Awakening, and the Valar would not abandon them to Morgoth's designs. Orome the huntsman found them wandering in the twilight and brought word to Valinor, and the Valar prepared for war. They marched upon Utumno with all their power, the earth trembling beneath their feet, the skies torn by their passage. Morgoth's armies met them in battle, and the north was shattered by the conflict. Mountains that once stood proud were cast down, valleys were flooded, and the shape of the world changed forever. When at last Utumno fell, Morgoth was captured and bound with chains forged by Aule the smith, and he was brought to Valinor to serve a sentence of ages in the halls of Mandos. But the deepest pits of Utumno were never fully explored, and things that Morgoth had made lingered there in the darkness. While Morgoth languished in chains, many of the elves heeded the summons of the Valar and journeyed westward to Valinor. 3 kindreds made the great journey, though not all completed it. Those who reached the Blessed Realm dwelt in the light of the 2 trees, growing wise and mighty beyond the measure of their kin who remained in Middle-earth. The Noldor, second kindred of the elves, became great craftsmen and lore masters, and among them arose Feanor, most gifted of all the children of Ilúvatar. He captured the light of the 2 trees in 3 jewels of surpassing beauty, the Silmarils, and their radiance was like nothing else in all creation. Morgoth coveted them with a hunger that burned through his centuries of captivity, and when at last his sentence ended and he walked free in Valinor, his desire for the Silmarils consumed all other thought. Morgoth feigned repentance and walked among the elves with fair words, but his heart remained black. He sowed discord where he could, whispering lies and half-truths, poisoning minds against one another. When the Valar grew suspicious and sought to restrain him, he fled into the wilderness and found there an ally as terrible as himself. Ungoliant was a spirit of darkness in spider form, a devourer of light whose hunger could never be satisfied. Together they crept back toward Valinor under cover of a great festival, and while the elves and Valar celebrated, they struck. Ungoliant drained the light from the 2 trees, drinking their radiance until they withered and died, and Morgoth slew Finwë, High King of the Noldor, stealing the Silmarils from his vault. Darkness fell upon Valinor for the first time, and when it lifted, Morgoth and Ungoliant had fled across the sea to Middle-earth. The death of the Uaishai trees and the murder of their king drove the Noldor to madness. Feanor, his heart burning with grief and rage, swore a terrible oath to recover the Silmarils at any cost, and his 7 sons swore beside him. This oath would doom them all, binding them to deeds of horror and despair across the ages to come. Feanor demanded that the Noldor follow him back to Middle-earth, to make war upon Morgoth and reclaim what was stolen. Many heeded his call, drawn by his passion and their own desire for vengeance. But the Noldor had no ships to cross the sea, and when the Teleri, their kindred who dwelt by the shore, refused to give or lend their vessels, Feanor took them by force. Elf slew elf at Alqualonda, the haven of the swans, and the white ships were stained with blood. This was the first kinslaying, and a curse fell upon all who participated. The host of the Noldor crossed the sea in the stolen ships, but treachery divided them. Feanor, caring nothing for those who followed his half-brother Fingolfin, burned the ships upon reaching Middle-earth, stranding half the Noldor in Valinor. Fingolfin's people were forced to cross the Helcaraxa, the grinding ice of the north, and many perished in that terrible journey. Meanwhile, Feanor led his followers against Morgoth's forces immediately upon landing, and the first battle of the Noldor in Middle-earth blazed across the northern lands. This was Dagor Nuin Gileath, the battle under stars, for the sun and moon did not yet exist. The elves fought with desperate fury, driving Morgoth's orcs back toward Angband, the fortress he had built upon the ruins of Utumno. Victory seemed within reach, but Feanor, in his rage, pressed too far ahead of his forces. Feanor pursued the retreating orcs almost to the gates of Angband itself, but Morgoth had laid a trap. From the shadows came Balrogs, spirits of fire and shadow who had served Morgoth since the beginning of days. They surrounded Feanor, and though he fought with a fury that would become legend, he fell at last beneath their flames. His sons bore him away from the field, but his wounds were mortal. As he lay dying within sight of Angband's towers, Feanor cursed Morgoth with his final breath, and the fire of his spirit was so great that when death took him, his body burned to ash and was scattered by the wind. No grave holds Feanor, greatest and most terrible of the Noldor. His oath lived on in his sons, a doom that would pursue them through all the years of the First Age. The sun rose for the first time as Fingolfin's host completed their crossing of the Helcaraxe, emerging into Middle-earth at the moment of its first dawn. Their coming brought hope to the elves already dwelling there, the Sindar who had never journeyed to Valinor, and together they prepared to continue the war against Morgoth. Years passed, and the Noldor established great kingdoms throughout Beleriand, the land west of the Blue Mountains. Fingolfin ruled from Hithlum in the north, while other lords carved out realms of their own. They besieged Angband, surrounding the fortress with watchful armies, and for nearly 400 years the siege held. This was a time of relative peace, when the elves built cities of beauty and pursued their crafts without fear. But Morgoth was not idle behind his gates. He bred new horrors in the depths, and he waited. The siege of Angband was never complete. Morgoth's fortress was built into the Iron Mountains themselves, and his power extended through tunnels and passages that no army could fully block. He sent spies and small raiding parties to test the elves' defenses, learning their weaknesses, studying their movements. He bred wolves of monstrous size, orcs in numbers beyond counting, and dragons that could withstand any weapon. 400 years gave him time to prepare, to rebuild his strength, to plan his revenge. The elves grew comfortable in their siege, believing that Morgoth could be contained forever. They underestimated his patience, his malice, and the depth of his hatred. When at last he was ready, he struck with a fury that would break the world. Dagor Bragolak, the Battle of Sudden Flame, shattered the siege of Angband in a single night of horror. Rivers of fire poured from the mountains, engulfing the plains of Ardgallen and transforming them into a wasteland of ash that would forever after be called Anfaglith, the gasping dust. Glaurung, father of dragons, led Morgoth's armies forth, and behind him came orcs beyond number and Balrogs wreathed in flame. The elven armies were overwhelmed. Fortresses that had stood for centuries fell in hours. Lords who had seemed invincible were slain or driven into flight. The sons of Feanor scattered, their realms destroyed. Fingolfin watched the ruin of everything he had built, the deaths of countless warriors, the triumph of darkness, and something broke within him. What Fingolfin did next would be sung of until the ending of the world. Alone, he mounted his horse and rode north, across the ruined plains, through the wreckage of his armies, straight to the gates of Angband itself. There he sounded his horn and called Morgoth to single combat, naming him Craven before all his servants. And Morgoth, unable to refuse the challenge before his own forces, came forth. The Dark Lord stood 3 times the height of an elf, clad in black armor bearing Grond, the hammer of the underworld. His very presence was terror, his shadow a weight that crushed hope. But Fingolfin did not flee. He drew Ringil, his sword that gleamed like ice, and he fought the Lord of Darkness alone. 7 times Fingolfin wounded Morgoth, each stroke leaving a scar that would never heal. Morgoth's blood, black and smoking, pooled upon the ground, and the Dark Lord limped forever after from the wounds dealt that day. But Fingolfin was mortal in a way that Morgoth was not, and exhaustion claimed him at last. Morgoth drove him to his knees, pinned him beneath his great shield, and raised Grond for the final blow. Yet even then, Fingolfin was not defeated in spirit. As the hammer fell, he drove Rhaengyl through Morgoth's foot with his dying strength, and the Lord of Darkness howled in pain. Thorondor, King of Eagles, descended from the heights and bore Fingolfin's body away before Morgoth could defile it, and he was buried in a cairn of stones in the mountains of Gondolin. No orc ever dared to walk upon that grave. After the Battle of Sudden Flame, the elves were scattered and weakened, but they were not destroyed. Survivors gathered in hidden strongholds in the forests of Doriath, protected by the magic of Melian, in the secret city of Gondolin that Morgoth had never found. They nursed their wounds and remembered their dead, and slowly they began to hope again. Maedhros, eldest son of Feanor, conceived a plan to unite all the free peoples of Beleriand in one final assault on Angband. He sent messengers to every realm, calling elves and men and dwarves to march together against the common enemy. For the first time since their exile began, the houses of the Noldor set aside their grievances and old hatreds. An army gathered such as Middle-earth had never seen, and they marched north with hope in their hearts. The Nir-Naith Arnoediad, the battle of unnumbered tears, was meant to be the elves' finest hour. Instead, it became their greatest tragedy. Morgoth knew of the alliance and its plans, for treachery had found its way into the councils of the free peoples. When the armies attacked, they found not a weakened enemy but a trap prepared over years. The forces of Angband emerged in numbers that darkened the plain, and wolves and dragons and balrogs struck at the flanks of the allied host. Worse still, some of the men who had joined the alliance turned against their elven allies at the crucial moment, betraying them to Morgoth for promises of power and reward. The army of the free peoples was surrounded, broken, and slaughtered. The field of Anfauglith ran with blood that day, and the tears of the survivors gave the battle its name. Fingon, High King of the Noldor, fell fighting alone against Balrogs after his guard was slain. Hurin of Dor Lomin, mightiest of men, made his last stand covering the retreat of what few elves survived, and his axe hewed a mountain of orc corpses before he was at last overwhelmed and captured. Morgoth took special pleasure in tormenting Hurin, setting him upon a stone chair to watch through sorcerous eyes as his children suffered tragedies beyond imagining. The kingdoms of the Noldor in the north were extinguished, one by one, and Morgoth's shadow spread across all of Beleriand. Hope seemed lost forever, and many believed the free peoples would never rise again. Yet even in the darkest hour, light found a way. Gondolin remained hidden, its towers white against the mountains. Doriath endured behind its girdle of enchantment. And in the far west, beyond the circles of the world, the Silmaril, that Beren and Luthien had wrested from Morgoth's crown, found its way to their grandson, Arendil the Mariner. He took it as his guide and sailed west across the sea to Valinor, daring the ban that forbade the exiled Noldor from returning. He came as a messenger of both elves and men, pleading for aid against Morgoth, and the Valar heard his prayer. For the first time since the Noldor had fled, the hosts of the West prepared for war in Middle-earth. The War of Wrath lasted 40 years and reshaped the face of the world. The Valar unleashed their full might against Morgoth, and with them came the Vanyar, the fairest of the elves who had remained in Valinor since the beginning. The armies of Angband, vast as they were, could not withstand this assault. Morgoth emptied his pits, summoning every creature he had bred, but they were not enough. He loosed his dragons, hoping that fire from the sky would turn the tide, but Arendil sailed his ship through the heavens with the Silmaril upon his brow, and the eagles of Manwë flew beside him. And Calagon the Black, greatest dragon ever to live, fell from the sky when Arendil slew him, and the crash of his body destroyed the towers of Thangorodrim. When the War of Wrath ended, Morgoth's fortress lay in ruins, and the Dark Lord himself was captured. The Valar bound him with the same chain that had held him before, Angainor, but this time there would be no pardon, no second chance. They thrust him through the door of night into the void beyond the world, where he would remain until the ending of all things. Some say he still waits there, whispering into the darkness, dreaming of return. But his defeat came at a terrible cost. The violence of the war had broken Beleriand beyond repair. The land sank beneath the waves, whole kingdoms swallowed by the hungry sea. Only scattered remnants remained above water, and the survivors fled eastward over the Blue Mountains into lands that would later be called Eriador and beyond. The map of the world was redrawn in salt water and sorrow. Not all of Morgoth's servants perished with their master. Sauron, greatest of his lieutenants, had served the Dark Lord since before the sun first rose. He was a Maya, a spirit of the same order as Gandalf and Saruman would later be. But he had been corrupted by Morgoth in the earliest days. When the hosts of Valinor came against Angband, Sauron saw that his master's cause was lost. Rather than face the judgment of the Valar, he hid himself, taking fair form and speaking words of repentance to the Herald of the West. But his repentance was feigned, and when commanded to return to Valinor for judgment, his pride would not allow it. He fled into the east and vanished from the knowledge of the wise, but he did not remain idle. In the shadows, he waited and plotted, and grew strong once more. The Second Age dawned upon a changed world. The elves who remained in Middle-earth established new realms, chief among them Lindon under Gil-galad, last High King of the Noldor. Men spread across the lands, founding kingdoms and learning the arts of civilization. The dwarves delved their halls in the mountains, and for a time there was peace. But Sauron's shadow crept back into the world around the year 1000 of the Second Age. He came first to the elves in fair guise, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, and offering to share his knowledge of craft and making. Gil-galad and Elrond mistrusted him and turned him away from Lindon. But the smiths of Eregion, hungry for knowledge, welcomed him with open arms. In Eregion, near the west gate of Khazad-dûm, the elven smiths had built a realm devoted to craft and creation. Their leader was Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor himself, and he burned with the same desire to create works of surpassing beauty that had driven his grandfather. Sauron fed that desire, teaching the smiths secrets they had never known, guiding their hands in works of unprecedented power. Together, they forged the Rings of Power, artifacts that could preserve and enhance, that could hold back the fading of the elves and maintain the beauty of their realms. 16 great rings they made, and Celebrimbor alone, taught by Sauron but working in secret, forged 3 more, the fairest of all. These were the 3 rings of the elves, untouched by Sauron's hand. But Sauron had plans of his own. In his fortress of Mordor, in the fires of Orodruin, he forged in secret the One Ring to rule all others. Into it he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. When he placed it upon his finger for the first time, the elves who wore the rings of power knew at once that they had been deceived. They heard his voice in their minds, felt his will pressing against their own, and understood that the Lord of Gifts was in truth the Dark Lord returned. In haste they removed their rings and hid them, and Celebrimbor sent the three away to those he trusted most. Sauron's trap had failed, but his rage was terrible. He gathered his armies and marched against Eregion to take by force what he could not take by cunning. The War of the Elves and Sauron devastated the westlands of Middle-earth. Sauron's forces swept through Eregion like fire through dry grass, overwhelming the elven defenders. Celebrimbor was captured and put to torment, for Sauron desired above all to know the location of the three rings. The elven smith endured agonies beyond description, but revealed nothing of the three, telling Sauron only where the lesser rings had been given. When at last Celebrimbor died, Sauron used his body as a banner, bearing it before his army as he marched against the remaining elven realms. Gil-galad sent Elrond with a force to aid Eregion, but they arrived too late to save it. Elrond was driven back and founded Imladris, which men would call Rivendell, as a refuge in the hidden valley. Sauron seemed unstoppable. His armies overran Eriador, pushing the elves back toward the sea. Gil-galad held Lindon, but it seemed only a matter of time before it, too, would fall. Yet salvation came from an unexpected quarter. Far to the west, across the sundering sea, lay the island kingdom of Númenor, granted to the Edain, those men who had fought beside the elves against Morgoth. The Númenorians had grown mighty in the 1,000 years since the War of Wrath, their ships sailing to every shore, their armies unmatched by any mortal power. When Gil-galad sent word of his plight, the king of Númenor answered. A great fleet appeared on the western horizon, bearing an army such as Middle-earth had not seen since the Elder Days. The Númenorians fell upon Sauron's forces with devastating power. These were men at the height of their strength, tall and fierce, wielding weapons of steel and fighting with disciplined fury. Sauron's orcs broke before them, fleeing in terror from warriors who seemed almost to be elves themselves. The Dark Lord was driven back, his conquests undone, his armies shattered. He retreated to Mordor with what forces he could salvage, and for many years he dared not challenge the might of Númenor directly. The elves were saved, but the balance of power had shifted. It was now clear that the Númenorians, not the elves, were the dominant force in Middle-earth, and Sauron would not forget this humiliation. Centuries passed, and Númenor grew ever mightier and ever prouder. The kings extended their dominion across the coasts of Middle-earth, building havens and fortresses, exacting tribute from lesser peoples. They began to envy the immortality of the elves, to resent the doom of men that bound them to death. The worship of Ilúvatar faded, replaced by fear of death and desire for endless life. Sauron watched from Mordor and saw opportunity. When the last and mightiest king of Númenor, Ar-Pharazôn the Golden, landed on the shores of Middle-earth. With an army so vast that Sauron's own forces fled at the sight of it, the Dark Lord did not resist. Instead, he surrendered himself and allowed the king to take him back to Númenor as a prisoner. But the prisoner soon became the power behind the throne. Sauron's fair form and honeyed words worked upon Ar-Pharazôn's pride and fear, turning the king away from what little faith remained. He spoke of Morgoth, the true God who could grant eternal life to those who served him. He had the white tree cut down and burned upon an altar, and in the temple he built to Morgoth, human sacrifices were made. The faithful, those Númenóreans who still honored the valor and kept friendship with the elves, were persecuted and killed. Sauron's corruption spread through the kingdom like poison, and at last he whispered the final temptation. The undying lands of Valinor lay open, he said. The Valar were not gods, but usurpers, hoarding immortality for themselves. A king strong enough could take what they denied. Ar-Pharazôn gathered the greatest fleet ever built, a navy of ships beyond, counting, bearing an army intended to challenge the very gods. He set sail for the Forbidden West, breaking the ban that had stood since the world was young. Sauron remained behind in Númenor, certain that whoever won the coming battle, he would benefit. But he underestimated the response his manipulation would provoke. When the fleet of Númenor landed upon the shores of Valinor, Ilúvatar himself intervened. The world was changed, bent into a new shape where Valinor was removed from the circles of the world entirely. Númenor was swallowed by a great wave, sinking beneath the sea in a single day of catastrophe. Ar-Pharazôn and his army were buried under falling hills, and Númenor was no more. Sauron's body was destroyed in the drowning, caught in the ruin he had engineered, but he was a Maia and could not truly die. His spirit fled back to Mordor, diminished but not defeated. Never again could he take fair form, for his ability to appear beautiful had been lost in the catastrophe, but his power remained. He took up the One Ring again and began to rebuild his strength, his hatred for the remnants of Númenor burning brighter than ever. For not all the Númenóreans had perished. Elendil the Tall and his sons, leaders of the faithful, had escaped the drowning with 9 ships. They were driven by the storm to the shores of Middle-earth, where they founded the kingdoms of Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. The realms in exile, as they came to be called, were mighty from their founding. Elendil ruled in Arnor, establishing his throne at Anúminas by the shores of Lake Avendim. His sons Isildur and Anarion ruled jointly in Gondor, building the great cities of Minas Ithil and Minas Anor, Osgiliath upon the river, and the Tower of Orthanc in the circle of Isengard. They brought with them treasures from drowned Númenor, the Palantiri, the Seeing Stones, and the White Tree, descended from the seedling that Isildur had rescued from Sauron's temple. For nearly 100 years they built and grew strong, but they knew that Sauron had survived the drowning. They knew that he would come for them, seeking vengeance for the destruction of his plans. Sauron struck first against Gondor, leading his armies against Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Rising Moon. The city fell, and Isildur escaped only by sailing down the Anduin with his family, while his brother Anarion held Osgiliath against the assault. Isildur made his way north to his father, bearing news of war and the need for alliance. Elendil sent messengers to Gil-galad in Lindon, and the High King of the Noldor answered. The last alliance of elves and men was forged, the final great union of the free peoples against the Shadow. From every corner of Middle-earth they gathered, elves of Lindon and Rivendell, men of Arnor and Gondor, even dwarves from Khazad-dûm. Such an army had not been seen since the War of Wrath, and perhaps would never be seen again. The host of the last alliance marched east, crossing the misty mountains and descending into the lands of Wilderland. They passed through Greenwood the Great, and elves of the Sylvan kindred joined their ranks. They crossed the great river and turned south toward Mordor, toward the Black Gate and the Dark Tower. Sauron's armies met them on the plain of Dagorlad, before the very entrance to his realm, and the Battle of Dagorlad raged for days. The field was vast, and warriors beyond counting fell on both sides. The waters of the Dead Marshes, which would later cover that plain, are said to hold the spirits of all who died there, elves and men and orcs alike, their pale faces still visible beneath the murky surface. The last alliance prevailed upon the plain, but Sauron was not yet defeated. He retreated behind the Black Gate and into his fortress of Barad-dûr, and the allies followed. They laid siege to the Dark Tower, surrounding it with their armies, cutting off all supply and reinforcement. The siege lasted 7 years, and during those years Sauron sent forth sorties and attacks, wearing down the besiegers. Anarion was slain by a stone cast from the tower, and many other lords fell to orc arrows and the swords of the enemy. But the alliance held, tightening its grip upon the fortress, waiting for Sauron to weaken or to emerge and face them in battle. And at last, after 7 years of blood and patience, Sauron came forth. The Dark Lord emerged from Barad-dûr in his terrible form, clad in armor black as the void, bearing a mace that could crush stone and steel alike. The heat of his presence withered all who drew near, and his eyes burned with malice beyond mortal comprehension. Gil-galad went to meet him, and Elendil at his side, and for a time the greatest of elves and the greatest of men stood against the greatest of Morgoth's servants. The battle that followed was the stuff of legend, 3 titans striving against one another while armies watched and the fate of the world hung in the balance. Gil-galad fell, his body burned by Sauron's heat. Elendil fell, his sword Narsil breaking beneath him. But together they had wounded Sauron, had weakened him enough for what came next. Isildur, son of Elendil, took up the hilt of his father's broken sword and cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. In that moment, all of Sauron's power poured out of him. His physical form collapsed, his spirit fled, screaming into the darkness, and Barad-dûr crumbled into ruin. The war was won. The Dark Lord was defeated. But Isildur, holding the ring that had caused so much suffering, refused to destroy it. Elrond and Círdan urged him to cast it into the fires of Mount Doom, but the ring had already begun its work upon him. He claimed it as Weregild for his father and brother, and he took it away with him when the armies departed Mordor. The seeds of future sorrow were planted in the moment of victory, and the shadow, though diminished, was not truly destroyed. Isildur did not enjoy his prize for long. 2 years after the war, as he journeyed north toward Arnor with a small company, orcs ambushed them in the Gladden fields. Isildur's guard was overwhelmed by sheer numbers, and he put on the ring to escape, becoming invisible to his enemies. But the ring betrayed him, as it had waited long to do. It slipped from his finger as he swam across the river, and without its protection, he was spotted by orc archers. Arrows found him in the water, and Isildur, heir of Elendil, perished in the shallows of the Anduin. The ring sank to the riverbed and was lost, passing out of all knowledge for more than 2,000 years. The Third Age had begun, and it would be an age of slow decline, of fading elves and dwindling men, until at last the ring was found again. The kingdom of Arnor, founded by Elendil in the north, did not long survive as a single realm. Within a few generations of Isildur's death, disputes over succession divided it into 3 lesser kingdoms. Arthedain in the northwest, Cardolan in the south, and Rudor in the east. Each claimed descent from Isildur. Each held a portion of his inheritance, and none possessed the strength to reunite what had been broken. This division would prove fatal, for a new shadow was rising in the north, and divided realms would fall far more easily than a united kingdom might have stood. The line of kings continued in Arthedain, strongest of the three, but the others drifted away, their royal houses failing, their lands becoming wild and dangerous. Around the year 1300 of the Third Age, a power established itself in the frozen wastes north of the Etten-Moors. Angmar, the realm was called, and its lord was the Witch King, chief of the Nazgul, the ring wraiths who had once been kings of men, and were now slaves to Sauron's will. The Dark Lord had not been idle during the centuries since his defeat. Though his spirit was too weak to take form, he had guided his servants from the shadows, and now he unleashed his greatest weapon against the heirs of those who had overthrown him. The Witch King's purpose was simple: the complete destruction of the Dunedain of the north, the scattering of Isildur's line, and the elimination of any who might one day challenge Sauron's return. Rudor fell first, corrupted from within. Its last kings were not of Isildur's line, and they made alliance with Angmar, opening their lands to the servants of the Witch King. Hillmen and dark sorcerers replaced the Dunedain in positions of power, and Rudor became a vassal of the enemy rather than a victim. This treachery exposed Cardolan and Arthedain to attack from an unexpected direction, and the wars that followed would last for nearly 700 years. The Witch King was patient, for what was time to one who did not age? He wore down his enemies generation by generation, battle by battle, death by death, until at last only Arthedain remained. Cardolan endured longer than Rudor, but was destroyed not by armies alone, but by plague. In the year 1636 of the Third Age, a great pestilence swept out of the east, the great plague that would devastate much of Middle-earth. Some whispered that the Witch King had sent it, though others believed it came from Mordor itself, a curse released from the still festering evil of that black land. Whatever its source, the plague struck Cardolan with particular fury. The Dunedain of that realm perished almost to the last, and those few who survived fled to Arthedain, or wandered as homeless refugees. The Barrow Downs, where the kings of Cardolan had been buried with honor, became haunted by evil spirits that the Witch King sent to dwell there, ensuring that even in death the Dunedain would find no peace. Arthedain stood alone against Angmar for centuries, its borders shrinking, its people dwindling. King after king led his warriors against the endless hosts of the Witch King, and king after king died in battle or of wounds taken in defense of his realm. The Palantir of Amon-Sul was brought to Fornost when that tower fell, and the Seeing Stone became one of Arthedain's most precious treasures, allowing its kings to communicate with Gondor in the south. But Gondor was far away and beset by its own troubles, and the help it could send was never enough. The elves of Lindon and Rivendell aided Arthedain as well, for Gil-galad's heirs remembered the alliance that had bound elves and men, but even their strength could not turn back the tide. The end came in the year 1974 of the Third Age. The Witch King gathered all his forces for a final assault on Fornost, last stronghold of the Northern Kingdom. Arvedui, whose name meant Last King, led the defense, but his army was too small, his walls too weak, his hope too faint. Fornost fell, and Arvedui fled north into the frozen wastes, seeking refuge with the snowmen of Forichel. There he waited through a bitter winter, hoping for rescue that seemed it would never come. When at last a ship from Linden reached him, he boarded it with the 2 Palantiri he had saved from Fornost, but the ice-laden waters of the bay proved treacherous. The ship was crushed by grinding ice, and Arvedui drowned, taking the seeing stones with him into the frozen deep. The line of kings in the north was broken, but the Witch King's triumph was short-lived. Even as Arvedui perished in the ice, a great fleet was crossing the sea from Gondor. Prince Eärnur, son of King Eärnil, had come north with an army to honor the ancient alliance between the 2 kingdoms. He arrived too late to save Arthedain, but not too late for vengeance. At the Battle of Fornost, the combined forces of Gondor, the elves of Linden, and the remnant of Arthedain's people crushed the armies of Angmar utterly. The Witch King himself rode forth to face Eärnur in single combat, but before they could meet, his horse shied away from the terror of the Ring Wraith's presence. The Witch King mocked the prince, and Eärnur would have pursued him, but Glorfindel, the Elf Lord, held him back. Glorfindel spoke prophecy in that moment, words that would echo through the ages until their fulfillment. He declared that the Witch King would not fall by the hand of man, and therefore Eärnur should not pursue him. The Nazgul Lord fled into the shadows, his realm destroyed, his armies scattered, but he himself remained undefeated. Angmar was no more, its fortresses torn down, its servants slain or fled. Yet the Witch King would return in later years to plague the free peoples once again. As for the Dunedain of the north, they became a wandering people, rangers who guarded the lands that had once been their kingdom without any knowing what they did or why. The line of Isildur continued in secret, chieftains rather than kings, until at last one would arise to reclaim his birthright. While the north fell into ruin, Gondor in the south faced its own centuries of conflict. The kingdom, founded by Isildur and Anarion, had grown mighty, its borders expanding in every direction, its cities among the greatest works of men since the fall of Númenor. But greatness breeds envy, and enemies gathered on every frontier. The Easterlings came in waves from beyond the Sea of Rhûn, fierce warriors in chariots and on horseback, seeking plunder and conquest. The Haradrim threatened from the south, their Mumakil, those great war beasts, striking terror into the hearts of even seasoned soldiers. And from within, the seeds of destruction were planted by pride and jealousy. The kin strife tore Gondor apart in the 15th century of the Third Age. King Eldacar, born of a mixed marriage between a king of Gondor and a princess of the Northmen, was challenged by those who believed the blood of Númenor should not be mingled with lesser men. Castamir, captain of ships and of pure Dunedain descent, led a rebellion that drove Eldacar from his throne. Osgiliath, the ancient capital that straddled the river Anduin, was devastated in the fighting, its great bridge broken, its dome of stars cast down, and the Palantir that had rested there was lost forever in the waters. Castamir ruled as a tyrant for 10 years, cruel and grasping, until Eldacar returned with an army of Northmen and reclaimed his crown. The final battle of the kin strife was fought at the crossings of Irui, and there Eldacar slew Castamir with his own hand. But Castamir's sons escaped with many of his followers, fleeing south to the haven of Pelargir, and then further to Umbar, the great southern port that Gondor had long controlled. There they established themselves as the Corsairs of Umbar, a thorn in Gondor's side that would not be removed for centuries. They raided the coasts, disrupted trade, and allied with Gondor's enemies whenever opportunity arose. The blood feud between the descendants of Eldacar and the descendants of Castamir would poison relations between Gondor and Umbar for more than 1,000 years. The Great Plague that destroyed Cardolan struck Gondor as well, though the southern kingdom survived where the northern one did not. So many died that the watch on Mordor was abandoned, the fortresses on the borders of the Black Land left empty. The White Tree died in Minas Anor, though a seedling was found and planted to replace it. King Telemnar and all his children perished, and the crown passed to his nephew. Osgiliath, already wounded by the kin strife, was abandoned entirely, its survivors fleeing to Minas Anor, which now became the capital and was renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard. The glory of Gondor was diminished, and it would never fully recover. The Wain Riders came next, a confederation of Easterling peoples who drove their great wagons across the plains of Rhovanion and crashed against Gondor's eastern borders like a wave against rocks. King Narmasil II led his army to meet them in the year 1856 and was slain, his forces routed. For decades, the Wain Riders occupied the lands east of Mirkwood, threatening Gondor with renewed invasion. When they finally struck again, allying with the Haradrim in a coordinated assault from east and south, it seemed that Gondor must fall. But King Eärnil, a general of great skill, defeated the southern army first and then force-marched his soldiers north to fall upon the Wain Riders, as they celebrated what they believed was their victory. The Battle of the Camp shattered their power forever. The line of kings in Gondor ended not in battle but in pride and folly. King Eärnur, the same prince who had defeated the Witch King at Fornost, ascended to the throne of Gondor in the year 2043 of the Third Age. He was a great warrior, but proud beyond measure, and he had never forgotten the mockery the Witch King had hurled at him on that northern battlefield. When the Lord of the Nazgul, now established as the master of Minas Morgul, the corrupted fortress that had once been Minas Ithil, sent a challenge to single combat, Eärnur accepted. His steward begged him not to go, but the king would not be swayed. He rode to Minas Morgul with a small escort, entered its gates, and was never seen again. No king has ruled in Gondor since that day. The stewards governed Gondor in the king's absence, swearing to hold the realm in trust until a king should return. Generation after generation they ruled, wise and capable, defending the borders against enemies who never ceased their assaults. The corsairs of Umbar raided the coasts. The Haradrim pressed from the south. Strange peoples moved in the lands beyond the river, and always the shadow in the east grew darker. Minas Morgul remained a place of dread, its pale light a mockery of the moon it had once honored. The Nazgul gathered there, and rumors spread that their master was rebuilding his strength in lands unknown. Rohan came to Gondor's aid when the steward's need was greatest. In the year 2510, the Balkoth, a fierce, Easterling people, crossed the Anduin in vast numbers, overwhelming Gondor's northern defenses. Sirion the steward called for help from the Eotheod, a people of horsemen who dwelt far to the north, descendants of the Northmen who had aided Gondor in ancient days. Yorl the Young answered that call, riding south with all his warriors in a journey that covered hundreds of leagues in mere days. They fell upon the Balkoth at the field of Celebrant like a thunderbolt, routing the enemy so completely that Gondor was saved from what had seemed certain destruction. In gratitude, Sirion granted to Eorl and his people the land of Kalinardon, the northern province of Gondor that the Balkoth had devastated. This land would be called Rohan, the Mark of the Riders, and its people the Rohirrim, masters of horses unmatched in all Middle-earth. Eorl swore an oath of eternal friendship between Rohan and Gondor, vowing that whenever Gondor called, the Rohirrim would answer. This oath of Eorl would be honored for 500 years, through wars and hardships, through the decline of both kingdoms. It would be fulfilled in the darkest hour of all, when the horns of Rohan sounded on Pelennor fields and changed the course of history. The long winter of 2758 tested both Rohan and Gondor to their limits. Snow fell for 5 months without ceasing, and famine stalked the land. The rivers froze solid, and the Dunlendings, wild men who dwelt in the hills west of Rohan and claimed the land had been stolen from them, saw opportunity in the Rohirrim's weakness. They invaded from the west, while orcs poured out of the misty mountains, trapping King Helm Hammerhand in the fortress that would afterward bear his name. Helm's Deep became a last refuge, and Helm himself became a figure of terror, stalking the snows at night to slay Dunlendings with his bare hands until he was found frozen to death at his post. Gondor sent aid when the winter broke, and together with Helm's nephews, they drove out the invaders. Frealaf, one of those nephews, became king and married a woman of Gondor, strengthening the bonds between the two realms. But the long winter had weakened both kingdoms, and recovery was slow. The orcs remained a constant threat, growing bolder year by year. The corsairs continued their raids, and in the shadows, forces were stirring that would soon demand the attention of all the free peoples. The Third Age was drawing toward its close, and the greatest war of all was yet to come. In the year 2941 of the Third Age, a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins found a ring in the depths of the Misty Mountains. He did not know what he had discovered, could not have imagined the significance of the small gold band he slipped into his pocket. For more than 2,000 years, the One Ring had lain lost beneath the river, and then in the hands of a wretched creature called Gollum, waiting in the darkness for its chance to return to its master. Now chance, or perhaps fate, had placed it in the possession of the most unlikely creature imaginable, and the final chapter of the Third Age had begun. The finding of the ring coincided with events that seemed unrelated, but were in truth part of a greater pattern. In that same year, Gandalf the Grey and 13 dwarves arrived at Bag End to recruit Bilbo Baggins for a quest to reclaim Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, from the dragon Smaug. This was no mere adventure for treasure. Gandalf had long worried that Smaug could be used by the enemy, that a dragon allied with Sauron would be a terror beyond reckoning. The quest to slay Smaug and restore the kingdom under the mountain was, in Gandalf's mind, a strategic necessity disguised as a dwarven homecoming. That a hobbit would stumble upon the One Ring during this journey was beyond even the wizard's foresight. Smaug had descended upon Erebor nearly 2 centuries before, drawn by the vast wealth the dwarves had accumulated in their mountain halls. His coming was sudden and devastating. Fire poured from his jaws, and the great gates of Erebor were blasted apart. The dwarves fled or perished, and the dragon made his lair upon their treasure, sleeping upon a bed of gold and gems. The nearby city of Dale was destroyed as well, its people killed or scattered. For 171 years, Smaug slumbered in the mountain, emerging only occasionally to hunt or to remind the surrounding lands that he still lived. His presence cast a shadow over the north, and none dared challenge him. The death of Smaug came not from dwarven axes or elven arrows, but from a single black arrow shot by Bard the bowman of Lake Town. When Bilbo's inadvertent revelation of a weakness in the dragon's armor reached Bard through a thrush, he was ready. As Smaug descended upon Lake Town in fury, burning boats and buildings, Bard stood alone on a bridge and loosed the arrow his ancestors had preserved for generations. It struck true, piercing the one bare patch in Smaug's jewel-encrusted belly, and the dragon fell dead into the lake, his body crushing what remained of the town beneath the waters. The north was free of its greatest terror, but the treasure of Erebor now lay unguarded, and many desired it. The Battle of Five Armies erupted before the gates of Erebor, a conflict that nearly saw elves, men, and dwarves destroying each other, while darkness gathered unnoticed. Thorin Oakenshield, king under the mountain, refused to share the treasure with those who had aided in Smaug's defeat, and armies gathered to take by force what negotiation could not achieve. Only the sudden arrival of goblins and wargs from the Misty Mountains, seeking vengeance and plunder of their own, forced the three peoples to unite against a common enemy. The battle raged across the slopes of the mountain and the ruins of Dale, and many fell on all sides before the goblins were routed with the aid of the eagles, and Beorn the Skin Changer. Thorin Oakenshield received his mortal wounds in that battle, fighting to defend his reclaimed homeland. He had led his company through countless dangers, driven by a fierce pride and an unshakable determination to see his people restored to their rightful place. In the end, that same pride nearly cost him everything, as his refusal to part with a single coin of treasure brought armies to his doorstep. Yet, in his final moments, as he lay dying, he made peace with Bilbo, acknowledging that the hobbit's values of friendship and mercy were worth more than all the gold in Erebor. Thorin was buried deep in the mountain with the Arkenstone upon his breast, and Dain Ironfoot, his cousin, became king under the mountain in his stead. While the quest for Erebor occupied Gandalf's attention, he did not forget the greater shadow that threatened all of Middle-earth. For years he had suspected that the necromancer of Dol Guldur, the abandoned fortress in southern Mirkwood, was in truth Sauron himself, slowly rebuilding his power. The White Council, led by Saruman the White, had long debated what to do about this threat, but Saruman had counseled patience, secretly hoping the ring would reveal itself near the Gladden fields where Isildur had fallen. At last, on the very eve of Thorin's quest, the council attacked Dol Guldur, driving out the darkness that dwelt there. But Sauron had already prepared his retreat, and he fled to Mordor, where his servants had been laboring for decades to rebuild Barad-dûr. Sauron's return to Mordor was the beginning of the end of the Third Age. The Dark Tower rose again from its foundations, black against the smoking sky, and the Nazgûl gathered once more to their master's side. Orcs multiplied in the mountains, trolls bred in dark places, and the lands around Mordor fell under shadow. Sauron began his search for the One Ring in earnest, sending his servants far and wide to seek any rumor of its whereabouts. He captured Gollum and learned that the ring had been found, that a creature called Baggins from a place called Shire now possessed it. The hunt that would lead to the War of the Ring had begun. 60 years passed between Bilbo's adventure and the beginning of the War of the Ring. 60 years in which the shadow grew, and the free peoples remained largely unaware of the doom approaching. Bilbo kept the ring in his pocket, using it occasionally for tricks and to avoid unwanted visitors, not understanding what he possessed. Gandalf grew increasingly suspicious but could not confirm his fears. Aragorn, heir of Isildur, wandered the wild lands as a ranger, hunting the servants of the enemy, learning all he could of their movements and plans. And in Mordor, Sauron marshaled his forces, building armies vast beyond counting, forging weapons and armor for the war to come. The War of the Ring began in earnest when Frodo Baggins, Bilbo's nephew and heir, fled the Shire with the One Ring. Gandalf had at last confirmed the ring's identity and understood the terrible danger it represented. If Sauron recovered it, his victory would be complete and eternal. If it could be destroyed in the fires where it was forged, in the heart of Mount Doom, Sauron himself would be destroyed, for he had poured too much of his own power into its making. The fate of all Middle-earth now rested upon a hobbit's shoulders, and the enemy knew he was coming. The 9 riders crossed the river and entered the Shire, seeking Baggins, and the race between darkness and hope began. Saruman's betrayal was revealed as the war unfolded. The White Wizard, greatest of his order, had long studied the ways of the enemy too deeply. He had used the Palantir of Orthanc to communicate with Sauron, believing he could deceive the Dark Lord while gaining power of his own. Instead, he had been corrupted, his mind bent toward domination rather than service. When Gandalf came to him for counsel, Saruman revealed his true allegiance, offering partnership in conquest. Gandalf refused and was imprisoned atop the Tower of Orthanc until rescued by the eagles at the command of Gwaihir, their lord. Saruman had now declared himself openly an enemy of the Free Peoples. Isengard became a forge of war. Saruman tore down the ancient gardens that had surrounded Orthanc, replacing trees with pits and furnaces where weapons were made and his new army was bred. The Uruk-hai were his creation, orcs crossed with goblin men, stronger and more resilient than ordinary orcs, able to march in daylight without weakening. He gathered wild men from Dunland, promising them vengeance against Rohan for ancient grievances. His spies and servants spread across the land, disrupting communications, sowing discord, preparing for the stroke that would bring down the Horse Lords before they could aid Gondor in its hour of need. The attack on Rohan came swiftly and without mercy. Saruman's forces swept across the Westfold, burning villages and slaughtering those who could not flee. Theodred, son of King Theoden and heir to the throne, fell in battle at the fords of Isen, and Rohan lost its strongest war leader at the moment of its greatest need. The king himself was under Saruman's spell, weakened and confused by the whispered poison of Grima Wormtongue, a traitor in the service of Isengard. It seemed that Rohan would fall without ever truly fighting, conquered by treachery rather than force of arms. But Gandalf came to Edoras with new allies, and his power broke the spell that bound the king. Theoden rode to war reborn, the years of enchantment falling from him like a discarded cloak. He gathered what forces he could, and made for Helm's Deep, the great fortress in the mountains where his people could shelter while he prepared to face Saruman's army. The battle that followed was among the fiercest of the war. 10,000 Uruk-hai marched against the Hornburg, bearing ladders and explosives, and the defenders numbered only a fraction of that force. All through the night, the Tas-hi battle raged. The walls breached, the gate shattered. The defenders pushed back and back until it seemed certain they must fall. But at dawn, Gandalf returned with the riders of the Westfold, and the Uruk-hai were caught between the hammer and the anvil. The destruction of Isengard came not from men or elves, but from the Ents, the ancient tree shepherds who had tended the forests since the world was young. Saruman's destruction of the trees around Orthanc had roused them to anger, and Merry and Pippin, two hobbits separated from the Fellowship, had brought them news of the wizard's treachery. The Ents marched upon Isengard in wrath, tearing down the walls, smashing the furnaces, breaking the dams that held the river. Saruman's fortress was flooded and destroyed, and the wizard himself was trapped in his tower, his power broken. The threat from the west was ended, but the greater war was only beginning. While Rohan struggled against Saruman, Gondor faced the full might of Mordor. Osgiliath, the ruined city on the river, became a battlefield once more, as the forces of Minas Morgul crossed the Anduin and drove out Faramir's rangers. The sons of Denethor, steward of Gondor, led the defense, Boromir having already fallen in the north, slain by orcs while defending Merry and Pippin. Faramir now bore the burden alone, and his father's grief over Boromir's death had turned to bitterness and despair. Denethor had looked into the Palantir of Minas Tirith and seen visions shaped by Sauron's will, visions of defeat and ruin that had broken his hope and his mind. The siege of Minas Tirith was the greatest battle of the War of the Ring. The armies of Mordor blackened the fields of Pelennor, their numbers beyond counting, their siege engines vast and terrible. Grond, the great battering ram named for Morgoth's ancient hammer, was brought to break the gate of the city. The Witch King himself led the assault, the lord of the Nazgul, whose power had grown so great that none could stand before him. When the gate fell and he rode through, it seemed that Minas Tirith must follow, that the White City would fall as so many cities had fallen before it. But the horns of Rohan sounded in the dawn, and 6,000 riders swept across Pelennor like the coming of a new day. Theoden led the charge, and the forces of Mordor scattered before the fury of the Rohirrim. For a moment it seemed that the tide had turned, that victory was within reach. But the Witch King descended from the sky upon his fell beast, striking down Theoden and his horse. The king lay dying, his body broken, and the lord of the Nazgul prepared to desecrate his corpse. He did not see the shield maiden who stood between them, or the hobbit at her side. Éowyn and Merry together accomplished what no warrior of men had managed in 3,000 years. The Witch King laughed at Éowyn's defiance, declaring that no living man could slay him. But Éowyn was no man, and when Merry drove his barrow blade into the back of the Nazgul's knee, the ancient enchantments of that blade broke the spells that bound the Wraith to the world. Éowyn's sword took the Witch King's head from his shoulders, and with a terrible cry, the Lord of the Nazgul was destroyed. Glorfindel's prophecy from the fields of Fornost was fulfilled at last, and the greatest of Sauron's servants was no more. The battle of the Pelennor fields was won, but at terrible cost. Theoden was buried with honor in Minas Tirith until he could be laid to rest in Rohan among his ancestors. Éowyn and Merry both lay near death from the black breath, the deathly cold that came from touching the Nazgul. Many thousands had fallen on both sides, and the city was wounded, its walls breached, its gate destroyed. And the victory, decisive as it seemed, had not ended the war. Sauron's full strength had not yet been deployed, and fresh armies were marching from Mordor. Unless something changed, the free peoples would be worn down and overwhelmed, and all would be lost. Aragorn, heir of Isildur, made the decision that would determine the fate of the world. Rather than wait behind walls for Sauron's next assault, he proposed to march upon the Black Gate itself, to challenge the Dark Lord openly and draw his attention away from Frodo, who even now crept toward Mount Doom with the ring. It was a desperate plan, perhaps a suicidal one. The army that could be gathered numbered fewer than 7,000, a pitiful force against the hosts of Mordor. But if Sauron believed the heir of his ancient enemy had come bearing the One Ring to challenge him, he would empty his land to meet that threat, and a single hobbit might slip through unnoticed. The host of the West marched east through Ithilien, past the ruined city of Osgiliath, along the road that led to the Morannon, the Black Gate of Mordor. They were men of Gondor and Rohan, rangers of the north, elves of Rivendell and Lorien, dwarves of Erebor, and one wizard who had returned from death itself. Gandalf the White rode at Aragorn's side, his power now fully revealed. No longer the wandering gray pilgrim, but a lord of ancient might. They knew they marched to almost certain death, yet none turned back. The world had been given to them to defend, and they would defend it with their last breath. Sauron took the bait. When his spies reported that a small army approached the Black Gate, bearing the banners of Gondor and Rohan, led by one who claimed to be the heir of Elendil, the Dark Lord believed his moment had come. His enemy had grown proud, had taken the ring for himself, and now came to challenge Mordor directly. Let him come. Sauron gathered his forces at the Morannon, tens of thousands of orcs and trolls and men who served the Shadow. He would crush this pretender, take the ring from his broken body, and then nothing in all the world would be able to stand against him. He did not think to look inward toward the mountain. The Battle of the Black Gate began with words. The mouth of Sauron, a living man so corrupted by service to darkness that he had forgotten his own name, rode forth to parley. He carried tokens taken from Frodo, the mithril coat and Sam's short sword, claiming that the ring-bearer had been captured and would suffer torments eternal if the army did not surrender. It was a lie meant to break their spirits, to make them despair and give up. Gandalf took the tokens but rejected the terms, and the battle was joined. The gates opened, and Sauron's army poured forth like a black tide, surrounding the small force of the West on every side. They fought in a ring upon the slag hills before the Morannon, the men of the West standing back to back against enemies that outnumbered them beyond reckoning. Trolls crashed through their lines, and orcs swarmed over the fallen. Aragorn stood at the center, Andúril blazing in his hand, the reforged sword of Elendil that had cut the ring from Sauron's hand 3,000 years before. Gandalf wielded fire and light, and the eagles came at last, Gwaihir and his kin, to battle the Nazgûl in the sky. But there were too many enemies, and the circle grew smaller, and it seemed that all hope would end upon those ash-covered slopes. Far away, in the heart of Mount Doom, two hobbits climbed the final steps to the Crack of Doom. Frodo had carried the ring from the Shire across more than 1,000 miles, through danger and darkness, hunted by the enemy, tempted at every turn by the ring's whispered promises. Sam had carried Frodo when his master could no longer walk. They had crawled the last miles through the wasteland of Mordor, half dead from thirst and exhaustion, driven by nothing but will and the knowledge that everyone depended on them. Now they stood at the end of all things, and the ring would not let go. Frodo claimed the ring at the last moment, unable to resist its call after carrying it so far. He placed it upon his finger and declared it his own, and Sauron, far away at the Black Gate, suddenly knew where his treasure was. The Dark Lord turned his attention inward, sending the Nazgul racing toward Mount Doom, abandoning the battle in his terror at what might happen. But before they could arrive, another player made his move. Gollum, who had followed the hobbits all the way from the Emyn Muil, attacked Frodo and bit the ring from his finger. For one moment of triumph he held his precious, and then he fell, dancing in joy, over the edge and into the fire. The destruction of the One Ring ended Sauron forever. Into that ring he had poured the greater part of his native power, and without it he could not maintain his existence in the physical world. Barad-dûr collapsed, its foundations undermined by the loss of the power that had sustained them. The Black Gate crumbled. The armies of Mordor lost the will that had driven them, for Sauron's will had been their will, and without it they were nothing. Some fled in mindless terror. Others simply stood and waited to die. The Nazgul, racing toward Mount Doom, dissolved into nothing as the power that had sustained their unlife was withdrawn. Mount Doom itself erupted in the ring's destruction, rivers of fire pouring down its slopes, the mountain shaking itself apart. Frodo and Sam were trapped upon a rocky outcrop amid a sea of lava, certain that they would die, yet at peace with their fate. They had accomplished what they set out to do. The ring was destroyed, Sauron was defeated, and the world was saved. If their lives were the price, they would pay it gladly. But Gandalf had not forgotten them. The eagles came, Gwaihir and two of his mightiest companions, and they plucked the hobbits from the burning mountain and bore them to safety. The War of the Ring did not end at the Black Gate alone. While Aragorn led his army south, other battles raged across the north of Middle-earth. Lorien, the Golden Wood where Galadriel dwelt, was assaulted 3 times by armies from Dol Guldur, the fortress that Sauron had used before his return to Mordor. 3 times the enemy was driven back by the power of Galadriel and the valor of the Galadrim, her elven warriors. When news came of Sauron's fall, Celeborn led an army across the river and took Dol Guldur itself, and Galadriel threw down its walls and cleansed the darkness from its pits. The shadow that had haunted Mirkwood for 2,000 years was lifted at last. Erebor and Dale faced their own siege during those dark days. An army of Easterlings descended upon them, seeking to destroy the kingdoms that had allied with Gondor. Brand, son of Bane, son of Bard the bowman who had slain Smaug, led the men of Dale in defense of their city. Dain Ironfoot, now old but still fierce, led the dwarves of Erebor. Together they fought before the gates of the mountain, and both kings fell in the battle. Brand and Dain dying side by side as their fathers' fathers had once fought side by side against the goblins. But their sons held the gates, and when news came of Sauron's defeat, the Easterlings fled and were pursued and scattered. The woodland realm of Thranduil also weathered the storm. Forces from Dol Guldur attacked the elves of northern Mirkwood, burning the forests that had stood since the Elder Days. Thranduil's warriors fought among the trees, using their knowledge of the wood to ambush and harry the enemy. When the shadow fell from the south, when Galadriel broke the fortress and cleansed the land, Thranduil and Celeborn met in the midst of the forest and divided it between them. The wood was renamed Erin Las Galan, the Wood of Green Leaves, and the darkness that had given it the name Mirkwood was ended forever. Even the Shire, peaceful and untouched throughout all the ages of Middle-earth, did not entirely escape the war. Saruman, expelled from Orthanc by the Ints, had made his way north with Grima Wormtongue, seeking petty vengeance upon the hobbits who had contributed to his downfall. He had established himself as a tyrant in the Shire, using ruffians and half-orcs to bully the hobbits and despoil their land. When Frodo and his companions returned from the war, they found their home oppressed and frightened. The Scouring of the Shire was the last battle of the War of the Ring, a small conflict by the standards of what had come before, but a reminder that evil can take root anywhere if good folk do nothing. The hobbits who had journeyed to Mordor and back were not the same gentle creatures who had left the Shire more than a year before. They had walked with kings and wizards, had seen wonders and terrors beyond the imagination of their neighbors. Merry and Pippin rode in the armor of Rohan and Gondor, knights of those realms, and their courage inspired the hobbits of the Shire to rise against their oppressors. The Battle of Bywater was fought and won, the ruffians driven out or captured, and Saruman was brought low at last. He was slain by Grima, his own servant, whom he had mistreated once too often, and with his death the last of the great powers of the Third Age passed from the world. Aragorn was crowned King Elessar in Minas Tirith, the first king to sit upon the throne of Gondor in nearly 1,000 years. He took Arwen Evenstar as his queen, daughter of Elrond, and the line of Luthien Tinuvio was renewed in mortal form. The reunited kingdom stretched from the northern wastes to the southern shores, and Arnor was rebuilt under his rule. The Dunedain came out of the shadows at last, rangers no more but lords of a restored realm. Peace came to Middle-earth, a peace that would last for 100 years and more under the reign of King Elessar and his descendants. The elves departed in the years that followed, sailing west from the Grey Havens to the Undying Lands. Galadriel went, and Celeborn eventually followed. Elrond sailed, bearing the grief of parting from his daughter, who had chosen mortality for love of Aragorn. Gandalf went too, his task complete, and with him went Frodo, who had been too wounded by the ring to find peace in Middle-earth. Bilbo had already gone ahead, the oldest hobbit who had ever lived, and uncle and nephew sailed together into the west. Sam remained for many years, raising his family, serving as mayor of the Shire, but in the end he too took ship from the Havens, last of the ring-bearers to leave the circles of the world. The Fourth Age dawned upon a world transformed by all that had come before. The wars of the Elder Days, the wars of Morgoth and the Silmarils, had shaped the very land, sinking continents and raising mountains. The wars of the Second Age had drowned Númenor and ended the dark reign of Sauron for a time. The wars of the Third Age had whittled away the great kingdoms, reducing them generation by generation, until only fragments remained. And then the War of the Ring had swept across Middle-earth, destroying the last great evil and opening the way for a new age of men. Every war had left its mark, every battle had changed the world, and those who fought in them were remembered in song and story. The great wars were over at last, but their echoes would never fully fade. In the Barrow Downs, the spirits of ancient Cardolan still lingered, trapped by spells laid in darker times. In the depths of Moria, where the dwarves had delved too deep and woken terror, shadows still gathered in forgotten halls. In the far north, where Morgoth's first fortress had been destroyed by the Valar, strange things still crawled in caverns never mapped. The world was healing, but it bore scars that would never completely disappear. Perhaps they were meant to remain, reminders of what had been lost and what had been preserved, lessons written in stone and bone for those who would come after. The children of the Fourth Age would grow up hearing tales of Frodo the Ring-Bearer, of Aragorn who was king, of Gandalf the White, and the Ents who broke Isengard. They would hear of older wars too, of Fingolfin who challenged Morgoth, of Beren and Luthien who stole a Silmaril from the Iron Crown, of Arendil who sailed to Valinor and pleaded for the world. These stories would be told around fires on winter nights, in great halls and humble homes, passed from parent to child across generations beyond counting. The wars were over, but the memory of those who fought them would endure as long as anyone remained to tell the tales. And so the long history of Middle-earth's wars drew to a close, from the first discord in the music of the Ainur to the last skirmish in the Shire. Thousands of years had passed. Entire ages of the world had risen and fallen. And through it all, the free peoples had struggled against shadows that sought to dominate them. They had not always won. They had suffered defeats so devastating that recovery seemed impossible, had watched kingdoms fall and civilizations crumble, had buried kings and heroes beyond counting in cairns and tombs across the land. But they had endured, and in the end they had prevailed. The world they bequeathed to their descendants was scarred but free, wounded but healing, dark in places but with light breaking through. Now the fires have burned low and the hour grows late. The battles are ended, the warriors at rest, the darkness driven back beyond the edges of the world. The stories will keep until morning, and morning will come as it always does, golden and gentle, touching the hills of the Shire and the towers of Minas Tirith and all the lands between. Sleep now, and let the ages pass like dreams, each one fading into the next, until you wake to find the sun streaming through your window and another day beginning. The wars of Middle-earth are over, but the world goes on, and so do we, one sleepy breath at a time, drifting peacefully toward whatever dreams may come. Contagium, Parte 6, 4,800 palavras. Phados, continua sum. The fall of Gondolin stands among the most tragic tales of the elder days, the destruction of a city that should have been impregnable. Turgon, son of Fingolfin, had built his hidden realm in a valley surrounded by mountains, accessible only by a secret way that none could find unless guided. For nearly 400 years, Gondolin remained concealed from Morgoth's eyes, its white towers gleaming in the sunlight, its fountains singing songs of water and light. The elves who dwelt there believed themselves safe, protected by mountains and secrecy, and they grew comfortable in their isolation. But treachery can find any gate, no matter how well hidden. Maeglin, nephew of Turgon, harbored a dark desire for his cousin Idril, and a resentment toward her husband Tuor, a mortal man who had been welcomed into the hidden city. When Maeglin was captured by orcs while mining in the mountains, Morgoth himself questioned him, and Maeglin's bitterness made him easy to corrupt. He revealed the location of Gondolin and the secret ways through the mountains, and Morgoth promised him lordship of the city and Idril as his prize. Maeglin returned to Gondolin and waited, keeping his betrayal secret while the armies of Angband gathered in the north. The attack came during a festival, when the elves celebrated the rising of summer. Dragons led the assault, their fire cracking the very mountains, and behind them came Balrogs, wreathed in shadow and flame, and orcs beyond counting. The walls of Gondolin, never tested in battle, crumbled under the onslaught. The elves fought with desperate courage, and many lords fell defending their people. Ecthelion of the Fountain met Gothmog, lord of Balrogs, in single combat, and they slew each other in the waters of the great fountain. the Balrog's fire quenched even as Ecthelion drowned. Glorfindel faced another Balrog on a narrow mountain path during the escape, and both fell into the abyss. Tuor and Idril escaped with their young son Arundel, leading a remnant of survivors through a secret passage that Idril had prepared, for she had never trusted Maeglin. Turgon fell defending his tower, the last High King of the Noldor to die in the wars of Beleriand. The city burned behind the fleeing survivors, its beauty consumed by dragonfire, its towers toppled, its songs silenced forever. Of all the hidden kingdoms of the elves, only Gondolin's fall was complete in total. Not a stone left standing upon another, not a fountain left singing. The refugees found shelter at the mouths of Sirion, where other survivors had gathered, but their days of safety were numbered. Nargothrond fell before Gondolin, another great elven realm brought low by treachery and pride. This underground fortress, carved from living rock beside the river Narog, had been founded by Finrod Felagund, fairest and most beloved of the Noldoran princes. After Finrod's death in the dungeons of Sauron, his nephew Orodreth ruled, but the kingdom's strength was spent in the disastrous Battle of Tumhalad. Glaurung, the dragon, led Morgoth's forces against the elves who had ventured out to meet them in open battle, and the slaughter was terrible. The dragon then turned upon Nargothrond itself, breaking down its gates with the fire of his breath and claiming its treasures for his hoard. The sack of Nargothrond brought grief upon grief, for Turin Turambar, the cursed son of Hurin, had unwittingly brought doom upon the realm he had sought to defend. It was Turin who had counseled open battle, Turin whose pride had led the elves out of their safe fortress to face the dragon, and it was Turin's sister Nienor who would later fall under Glaurung's spell, losing all memory of who she was, only to marry her own brother in ignorance and bear his child. When the truth was revealed, both took their own lives, and so the curse that Morgoth had laid upon their father reached its bitter fulfillment. Doriath, the kingdom of Thingol and Melian, fell not to Morgoth's forces, but to the curse of the Silmarils and the oath of Feanor's sons. When Thingol acquired a Silmaril, the one that Beren had cut from Morgoth's crown, the sons of Feanor demanded its surrender. Thingol refused, and for a time his realm was protected by the Girdle of Melian, a barrier of enchantment that no enemy could pass. But Thingol was slain by dwarves in a dispute over the Naglamir, the necklace into which the Silmaril had been set, and Melian's grief was so great that she withdrew her power and departed for Valinor. The girdle fell, and Doriath lay open. The second kinslaying followed as the sons of Feanor attacked Doriath to claim the Silmaril. Celegorm and Curufin and Caranthir fell in that battle, slain by Dior, Thingol's heir, though Dior himself was killed as well. The Silmaril escaped them, carried away by Dior's young daughter Elwing, who fled to the havens of Sirion at the mouths of the great river. There the survivors of Gondolin and Nargothrond and Doriath had gathered, a last remnant of the free elves of Beleriand, and there Elwing wed Arundel, son of Tuor and Idril. But the oath still drove the remaining sons of Feanor, and they would not rest while a Silmaril remained beyond their grasp. The third kinslaying was the cruelest of all, for the sons of Feanor fell upon a people already broken by loss and exile. Maedhros and Maglor led their followers against the havens of Sirion, and Elf slew Elf once more in the surf and among the white ships. Elwing cast herself into the sea rather than surrender the Silmaril, but Ulmo the Vala saved her, transforming her into a white bird so that she could fly to her husband's ship upon the Western Ocean. Her twin sons, Elrond and Elros, were captured by Maedhros and Maglor, though the brothers treated them kindly, for even they had grown weary of blood and horror. The oath had brought nothing but grief, and 2 Silmarils still lay beyond their reach. The War of the Dwarves and Dragons raged in the Grey Mountains during the later Third Age, a conflict little known to the histories of men but devastating to the dwarven kingdoms of the north. The dwarves had established great halls in the arid Mithrin after being driven from Moria, mining the rich veins of gold and silver that lay beneath those peaks. But their wealth drew the attention of cold drakes, wingless dragons of the north, and the dragons came in hunger and greed. King after king fell to their flames, hall after hall was sacked and plundered, until at last the dwarves abandoned the Grey Mountains entirely, some returning east to the Iron Hills, others journeying to Erebor, where Thror would establish his kingdom. The Battle of Azanulbizar, fought before the eastern gates of Moria, was the culmination of the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, a conflict that began with the murder of Thror. The grandfather of Thorin Oakenshield had wandered in his madness to the gates of Moria, dreaming perhaps of reclaiming his ancestors' home, and there he was captured by Azog the Orc. His head was cut off and branded with Azog's name, and his body was cast out for the ravens. When word reached his son Thrain, the dwarves gathered for vengeance, and for 6 years they hunted orcs through every cavern and tunnel of the Misty Mountains. The final battle was fought in the valley called Azanulbizar in Dwarvish, Dimril Dale in the common speech. Every clan of dwarves sent warriors, and the orcs gathered all their strength to meet them. The fighting was terrible, for orcs poured out of Moria's gates in endless waves, and dwarves fell in ranks before them. Thrain lost an eye, and his son Frerin was slain. But the dwarves would not retreat, could not retreat, for the memory of Thror's desecration drove them forward. Thorin, then a young prince, lost his shield, and took up an oaken branch to defend himself, earning the name Oakenshield that he would carry for the rest of his life. Dain Ironfoot, then only a youth, slew Azog himself upon the steps of the Eastern Gate, avenging Thror at last. But when the battle was won and the orcs were scattered, the dwarves looked upon Moria's open gates and knew they could not enter. Dain had glimpsed something in the darkness, a shadow of flame and terror, and he warned that Durin's bane still lurked within. The dwarves burned their dead, for they were too many to bury, and the great pyre left the valley bare of trees forever after. They departed, victorious but diminished, and Moria remained closed to them, a prize that could be seen but not claimed. The long defeat of the Sylvan elves in Greenwood began when Sauron established himself at Dol Guldur around the year 1000 of the Third Age. The great forest that had once been wholesome and fair began to darken. Shadows creeping northward year by year, fell things breeding in the gloom. The Wood Elves, ruled first by Orifer and then by his son Thranduil, retreated before the spreading corruption, abandoning their southern settlements, pulling back toward the mountains of Mirkwood and the forest's northern reaches. For 2,000 years, this slow retreat continued, the elves fighting endless skirmishes against spiders and orcs and nameless things. Orifer led his people in the last alliance, joining the great host that marched against Sauron at the end of the Second Age. But the Sylvan elves were woodland folk, ill-suited to the formal warfare of the Noldor, and Orifer was proud, unwilling to submit to Gil-galad's command. He charged too soon at the Battle of Dagorlad, before the signal was given, and his forces were surrounded and cut down. Orifer himself fell, and more than half his warriors with him. Thranduil led the survivors home after the war, diminished and grieving, to continue the long struggle against the darkness of Mirkwood. The wars between Gondor and the Haradrim stretched across centuries, a slow, grinding conflict along the southern borders that ebbed and flowed, but never truly ended. The Haradrim were a proud people, rulers of vast lands in the hot south, and they resented Gondor's dominion over the coastal territories. Again and again they rose in rebellion, sometimes alone, sometimes in alliance with other enemies of the White Tree. The Mumakil, their great war beasts, struck terror into Gondorian soldiers, and the archers of Harad were legendary for their skill. Many a captain of Gondor earned renown upon those southern borders, and many lie buried in the sands. The conflict between Gondor and the corsairs of Umbar was both a foreign war and a civil war, for the corsairs were themselves of Dunedain blood, descendants of the followers of Castamir the usurper. They had never forgotten their exile, never forgiven the descendants of Eldakar, and their hatred burned across generations. They raided the coasts of Gondor constantly, disrupted trade, burned fishing villages, and carried off captives into slavery. Twice Gondor launched great expeditions to take Umbar itself, and twice they succeeded temporarily. But the corsairs always returned, sailing up from havens further south to reclaim their fortress and renew their attacks. The great Captain Thorongil led the most successful assault on Umbar, burning many ships in the harbor and slaying the captain of the haven in single combat. Thorongil had appeared in Gondor seemingly from nowhere, a warrior of the north who served first Thengel of Rohan and then Ecthelion of Gondor. He won victory after victory, and many believed he would be named Ecthelion's heir. But after Umbar, he departed without warning, sailing into the east and vanishing from history. None knew then that Thorongil was Aragorn, heir of Isildur, and that he would return decades later to claim not Gondor alone, but the kingship of all the Dunedain. The invasion of the Balcoth in the year 2510 tested Gondor to its limits. These Easterlings, a confederation of wild peoples from beyond the Sea of Rhûn, poured across the Anduin in vast numbers, overwhelming the northern defenses. Gondor's armies were stretched thin, committed to other borders, and the steward Cirion could not gather enough strength to meet the threat. He sent messengers north to the Eotheod, calling upon an alliance made generations before, and Eorl the Young answered that call. The riders came south in a journey that should have taken weeks, but somehow took only days, and they fell upon the Balcoth at the Field of Celebrant like a thunderbolt from clear sky. The Battle of the Field of Celebrant was the salvation of Gondor and the birth of Rohan. The Balcoth had trapped a Gondorian army against the river, preparing to annihilate them, when the horns of the Eotheod sounded from the north. Eorl led the charge himself, and the Easterlings, who had never faced cavalry of such quality, broke and fled. They were pursued and slaughtered. Their invasion ended in a single day of disaster. In gratitude, Cirion granted the Eotheod the province of Calenardon, and Eorl swore the oath of eternal friendship that would bind Rohan and Gondor together through all the years to come. The oath of Eorl was never broken. The Dunlendings proved persistent enemies of Rohan, believing that the Rohirrim had stolen their ancestral lands. These wild men of the hills west of the Gap of Rohan had dwelt in Calanardon before the Eotheod came, and they had been displaced by the new settlers. Their resentment festered across generations, erupting periodically in raids and invasions. They allied with Saruman during the War of the Ring, seeing in the wizard a chance to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. The defeat at Helm's Deep ended their hopes, but the hatred did not die. In the years after the war, it would take careful diplomacy to make peace between Rohan and the Dunlendings at last. The first battle of the Fords of Isen, fought just days before Helm's Deep, saw the death of Theodred, only son of King Theoden. Saruman had sent his forces to secure the crossings of the river Isen, knowing that whoever held the fords controlled access to Rohan from Isengard. Theodred gathered what riders he could and rode to meet the threat, but he was overwhelmed by superior numbers. He fell defending an island in the midst of the ford, surrounded by his most loyal guards, fighting until a great orc hewed him down. His death robbed Rohan of its finest commander at the moment of its greatest need, and some believe that was precisely Saruman's intention. The battles of Lorien during the War of the Ring are little remembered, overshadowed by the greater conflicts at Helm's Deep and Pelennor, but they were fierce and costly nonetheless. 3 times the forces of Dol Guldur crossed the Anduin to assault the Golden Wood, and 3 times they were driven back by the Galadrim and the power of Galadriel herself. The woods were scarred by fire and the passage of enemies, and many elves fell in defense of their home. But Lorien held, and when news came of Sauron's fall, Celeborn led an army across the river to take Dol Guldur at last. The cleansing of Dol Guldur was the final act of the war in the north. Galadriel herself threw down the walls and pits where darkness had dwelt for 2,000 years, using the power of Nenya, her ring of water, to wash away the corruption and let light return. The forest began to heal from that day forward, the shadows retreating, the fell creatures dying or fleeing south. The wood elves emerged from their long retreat, reclaiming lands their grandparents had abandoned, and for the first time in millennia, Greenwood the Great began to deserve its ancient name once more. And so the tale of Middle-earth's wars comes to its end, not with a final thundering battle, but with healing and renewal. The forests grew green again, the rivers ran clean. The lands that had been scarred by conflict slowly covered their wounds with new growth. The great powers passed away, elves sailing west, wizards departing, dragons dying in their lairs, and the age of men truly began. There would be other wars, for men are never long at peace, but they would be lesser conflicts, fought for smaller stakes, without the cosmic weight of the struggles that had shaped the world. The time of legends was ending, and the time of history was at hand.